Let me ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly, not to me, but to yourself. How do you speak to yourself when you fail? Not when things are going well, not when you're winning, but when you fall short, when you make a mistake, when you don't live up to the standard you set for yourself. Chances are, your inner voice turns into something cruel. You call yourself names, you beat yourself up, you replay the failure on a loop like a punishment you believe you deserve. And you think, deep down, that this is what keeps you sharp. That if you're not hard on yourself, you'll get lazy, weak, or worse, mediocre. But here's the truth. That voice isn't making you stronger. It's destroying you from the inside out. You've been lied to. You were raised in a culture that told you excellence comes from self-punishment. That self-worth must be earned. That pain is productive. But what if I told you that the very system you've been using to grow is the reason you're stuck? That your endless self-criticism isn't a tool for success, it's a trap. And the more you use it, the deeper you sink. You see, people don't talk about the cost of being at war with yourself. The silent exhaustion of fighting your own mind every single day. The anxiety that creeps in not because of the world, but because of your own internal sniper, always ready to shoot you down the moment you slip. You can't relax, you can't rest, you can't celebrate your wins, because nothing is ever enough. You've convinced yourself that being unkind to yourself is what drives you forward. But the reality? It's what's been holding you back. Kristin Neff, a psychologist who spent decades studying this exact behavior, discovered something that changes everything. People who show themselves compassion, the same kindness they'd offer a dear friend, don't become complacent. They become resilient. They don't give up more easily. They rise faster after failure. They don't make more excuses. They achieve more, because they're not wasting their energy fighting themselves. Think about that. What would your life look like if you stopped treating yourself like your own worst enemy? What if the key to growth, to change, to success wasn't being harder, but being gentler? This isn't about sugarcoating. This isn't about letting yourself off the hook. It's about facing reality without adding the weight of self-hatred. It's about breaking the cycle that's been silently killing your potential. And if right now, as you're hearing this, there's a voice inside you saying, "But I don't deserve that kind of kindness," that's exactly the voice we're going to confront. Because the truth is, you've been suffering under the illusion that you need to earn your own love. And until you break that illusion, nothing will ever be enough. By the end of this video, you will understand why everything changes when you stop being so hard on yourself. Not because you give up, but because you finally stop getting in your own way. You don't wake up one day and decide to become your own enemy. It happens slowly, quietly. It starts with a mistake, maybe small, maybe not. But instead of learning from it, you punish yourself. You internalize the failure, you wear it like a scar, and then you repeat. Over time, the voice that once whispered, "You can do better," turns into a scream, "You're not enough. You never were." And here's the tragedy. You don't question that voice. You obey it. Because you've been conditioned to believe that suffering equals growth. That if it doesn't hurt, it's not working. You've confused discipline with cruelty, responsibility with shame, motivation with fear. But let's be brutally honest for a moment. What has this internal war actually given you? You think your self-hatred has kept you accountable, that it's pushed you forward. But the truth is, it has done the exact opposite. It has made you afraid to try, afraid to fail, afraid to be seen. Because every failure isn't just a setback, it's a reason to hate yourself more. You don't grow, you shrink. You procrastinate because you're terrified of not doing something perfectly. You avoid risks because you know the punishment waiting on the other side if you don't succeed. This isn't self-improvement. This is self-destruction masquerading as ambition. You've created a version of yourself that's always on edge, always watching, judging, criticizing. And when things go wrong, which they inevitably do, that version of you is right there, ready to tear you apart. You think you're being realistic, but you're not. You're being brutal, and you've convinced yourself that you deserve it. But ask yourself, would you ever speak to a friend the way you speak to yourself? Would you ever call someone you love a failure, a disappointment, a waste of potential, just because they made a mistake? Of course not, because cruelty doesn't create growth. It creates fear. So why do you think fear is what will fix you? You weren't born hating yourself. You learned it from parents who thought criticism was love, from teachers who valued performance over humanity, from a culture that profits off your insecurity. You've been taught that your worth is conditional on your productivity, your success, your perfection. But it's a lie, and until you unlearn it, you'll stay stuck, achieving less, feeling worse, and never understanding why. This isn't just psychological, it's neurological. Kristin Neff's research shows that when you're harsh with yourself, your brain activates the same threat response system that lights up when you're physically attacked. Your body goes into survival mode. Cortisol floods your system. Your creativity, logic, and focus shut down. You don't perform better. You just panic harder. So let me ask you again, who is this internal war really helping? It's not making you stronger. It's making you smaller. And you don't need more discipline, you need a new strategy. In the next part, I'll introduce you to the science behind that new strategy. One that doesn't rely on fear, but on something far more powerful, self-compassion. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. By now, you might be thinking, okay, being hard on myself isn't helping. But what's the alternative? What could possibly replace that inner voice of discipline, the one I've relied on for years to keep myself in line? The answer is something so simple, it's often dismissed, and so powerful that it rewires your brain from the inside out. It's called self-compassion. Now let me be clear. Self-compassion is not self-pity. It's not laziness. It's not about making excuses or lowering your standards. It's not some fluffy self-help slogan you slap on when things fall apart. It is a scientifically grounded, psychologically transformative approach to motivation, resilience, and emotional strength. And it works better than self-criticism ever will. Kristin Neff, a pioneering psychologist and professor at the University of Texas, has spent the last 2 decades studying self-compassion. What she discovered flips everything we've been taught about motivation on its head. In hundreds of studies, Neff and her colleagues found that people who treat themselves with kindness, the same kindness they'd give to a friend, are not only more emotionally resilient, they're more likely to take responsibility for mistakes, to bounce back from failure, and to achieve their long-term goals. Why? Because when failure doesn't lead to self-hatred, you stop being afraid of trying. Think about that. When your inner world is a safe place, you're free to take risks. You're not walking on eggshells, terrified of messing up, because you know that even if you do fall short, you'll meet yourself with understanding, not punishment. That psychological safety unlocks effort, persistence, and adaptability in ways that fear-based motivation never can. And this isn't just theory. It's biology. Harsh self-criticism activates your brain's threat defense system, the same system that lights up when you're physically attacked. You get a surge of cortisol, your body tenses, your heart rate spikes, and your brain prepares for war. Creativity shuts down. Logical thinking collapses. Long-term vision disappears. You don't get smarter, you get scared. And in that state, you either freeze, lash out, or retreat into avoidance, which is exactly what keeps you stuck. Self-compassion, on the other hand, activates the care system in your nervous system, the one associated with safety, connection, and healing. It lowers cortisol and releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. That's why when you speak to yourself with warmth, when you literally place your hand on your heart and say, "I'm here for you," your nervous system shifts. Your body feels safe again. And when you feel safe, you think more clearly, act more courageously, and recover more quickly from setbacks. Let me say it again. Self-compassion doesn't make you weak. It makes you unstoppable, because you're no longer wasting energy fighting an internal battle every time you fall short. You're no longer burning out trying to prove you're worthy. You're no longer paralyzed by the fear of failure. You grow not because you're terrified of what will happen if you don't, but because you want to. Because you care enough about yourself to want better. That's a completely different engine, and it goes much further. Neff describes self-compassion as having three essential components: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. Self-kindness means replacing brutal judgment with warmth and encouragement. Common humanity reminds you that imperfection and struggle are not evidence of failure. They're the shared experience of being human. And mindfulness allows you to observe your emotions without being consumed by them. Together, these three create a powerful internal environment where growth isn't driven by fear of failure, but by the desire to thrive. You begin to understand that your flaws don't make you unworthy. They make you real. And when you stop seeing every mistake as proof of your inadequacy, you start to take risks again. You start to trust yourself again. You start to live. But how do you actually do that in the moments when your inner critic is screaming the loudest? How do you replace years, maybe decades, of self-hatred with a new way of relating to yourself? In the next part, I'll walk you through the exact practices Kristin Neff developed. Practical, powerful tools that retrain your mind to respond with compassion instead of cruelty. You've been taught that being hard on yourself is a strength, a necessary evil, that it's what keeps you driven, focused, and disciplined. Maybe you even wear your self-criticism like a badge of honor. But let's stop pretending. Because if this strategy really worked, wouldn't you already feel better about yourself? Wouldn't you already be where you want to be? The truth is, relentless self-criticism doesn't sharpen you. It dulls you. It doesn't elevate your performance. It erodes it. And it doesn't create lasting motivation. It creates anxiety, burnout, and fear of failure. Kristin Neff's research breaks this illusion wide open by showing us exactly how and why self-criticism backfires. It doesn't push you forward. It keeps you trapped in a cycle of self-sabotage. Let's break down the damage. First, self-criticism activates your threat defense system. When you attack yourself internally, your brain doesn't recognize that the threat is coming from inside the house. It responds the same way it would to an actual external danger, by flooding your body with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. You enter fight, flight, or freeze. Your heart races. Your muscles tighten. Your ability to think clearly disappears. You don't become more productive or more focused. You become scared, tense, and mentally scattered. You either shut down, procrastinate, or run from the task completely. So instead of pushing through, you spiral. And what do you do next? Criticize yourself even harder. Thus, the cycle continues. Second, harsh self-criticism creates a fear of failure so intense that you start avoiding any situation where you might fall short. It's not laziness, it's terror. If every mistake will lead to an internal assault, why risk it? Why try something hard? Why step outside your comfort zone? You tell yourself you're just not motivated. But in reality, you've created a psychological environment so hostile that your system refuses to move forward. You don't lack discipline, you lack safety. Third, self-criticism is emotionally exhausting. You're wasting enormous mental energy monitoring yourself, judging every move, replaying every mistake, and punishing every flaw. That's energy you could be using to create, to solve problems, to heal, to grow. Instead, you're burning it all on inner warfare. It's like trying to climb a mountain with a 100-pound bag of self-loathing strapped to your back. Fourth, and perhaps most damaging of all, self-criticism leads to shame, not growth. And here's the key distinction. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am something wrong. Guilt is productive. Shame is paralyzing. When you make a mistake and respond with compassion, you can reflect, learn, and do better. But when you respond with shame, you collapse. You withdraw, you isolate. You lose belief in your worth, your value, and your ability to change. You start to think, why bother? And here's the insidious part. This emotional state becomes familiar. You start to confuse it with responsibility. You start to believe that if you're not feeling bad about yourself, you're not trying hard enough. That if you ease up, you'll lose control. That self-hatred is somehow noble. But that's not responsibility. That's trauma. You're not growing. You're surviving. You're not motivated. You're scared. And until you break this pattern, you'll keep mistaking your suffering for strength. So what's the alternative? It's not delusion. It's not denial. And it's definitely not complacency. It's a radical shift in how you respond to failure, struggle, and imperfection. Not with judgment, but with compassion. In the next part, I'll show you exactly how to make that shift. We're going to explore powerful, practical tools that retrain your inner voice so that it stops sounding like your worst enemy and starts becoming your greatest ally. These aren't vague affirmations. They're psychological interventions backed by science and built for real-life pain. If you've ever wondered how to stop being so hard on yourself, this is where it begins. It's not enough to understand that self-criticism is harmful. You need to know what to do instead. And let's be honest, if you've been speaking to yourself with cruelty for years, maybe even decades, you can't just decide to be kind one day and expect everything to change. Your brain has been wired for punishment. Your nervous system is used to bracing for impact. Your default setting is war. So how do you shift that? Kristin Neff developed a series of practices to help you do exactly that. Tools that are simple, but far from shallow. These are not motivational mantras. They are psychological reprogramming strategies, grounded in research, designed to interrupt the habit of self-attack and replace it with something revolutionary: self-support. The first practice is called the Compassionate Friend Exercise, and it's more powerful than it sounds. Here's how it works. The next time your inner critic shows up, maybe you failed, procrastinated, snapped at someone, or just feel inadequate, pause. Literally stop and write down what your inner voice is saying, word for word. Be honest, don't soften it. Maybe it says, "You're pathetic. You always mess things up. You're never going to change." Then, imagine someone you love. A best friend, a sibling, even a child, had just come to you feeling the same way. What would you say to them? Would you call them pathetic? Would you tell them they're doomed to fail forever? Of course not. You'd say something like, "You made a mistake. That doesn't make you worthless. Let's figure out what went wrong and try again." Now, take those exact words and say them to yourself, out loud. It might feel awkward at first, but you're not doing this for comfort. You're doing it to rewire your brain. The second practice is recognizing common humanity. One of the most toxic beliefs self-criticism creates is the illusion of isolation. The idea that you're the only one struggling like this, that everyone else has it together, that your flaws are unique, shameful, and unforgivable. But that's a lie. Every single person you've ever admired has doubted themselves, failed, struggled, fallen short, just like you. Neff suggests this mental reframe. Millions of people right now are experiencing the exact same thing I am. I'm not broken, I'm human. Say it again and again. Say it until your shame loses its grip. Then comes the self-compassion break, a deceptively simple 3-step ritual you can use in moments of acute pain or self-attack. Step 1 is mindfulness. Acknowledge what you're feeling. Name it. This is a moment of suffering. I feel ashamed. I feel afraid. Step 2 is common humanity. Suffering is part of life. Everyone goes through this. I'm not alone. Step 3 is self-kindness. Place your hand on your chest, breathe deeply, and say, "May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself the compassion I need." These steps are not just words. They're neurological switches, pulling your brain out of attack mode and back into calm, connected awareness. Another key tool is reframing the inner critic into compassionate motivation. Take a harsh judgment like, "You're so lazy, get it together." Now translate it into a voice that still holds you accountable, but without abuse. "You've been tired. That's okay. But you also want to move forward. What's one small step you can take right now?" It's not about letting yourself off the hook. It's about giving yourself a real shot at moving forward without fear. Neff also recommends a daily self-compassion journal. Each night, reflect on a moment when you were hard on yourself. Write down what your critic said, then write your compassionate response. Remind yourself why you are not alone. This isn't busy work, it's cognitive restructuring. Every time you do it, you weaken the critic's grip. Every time, you strengthen the part of you that knows how to care for yourself. And let's not underestimate the power of touch. Neff's research shows that physical gestures, like placing your hand over your heart or gently holding your own face, trigger the release of oxytocin and activate the care system. When your nervous system is flooded with fear, touch tells your body, "You are safe now." Even a small gesture can be a turning point when you feel overwhelmed by shame. Finally, one of the most life-changing practices is to create a good enough standard. Perfectionism is just shame wearing a mask. If you never define what enough means, you will never arrive. So define it clearly. For your work, your health, your relationships, write it down. Remind yourself, anything beyond this is a bonus, not a requirement for self-worth. This is how you stop chasing a finish line that keeps moving. Now let's be real. Practicing self-compassion doesn't erase pain. It doesn't guarantee success. What it does is change your relationship to failure, to struggle, to your own humanity. It gives you a foundation that doesn't collapse every time you make a mistake. And from that foundation, everything else becomes possible. But what happens in the real moments, when you fail publicly, when you make a painful mistake, when the shame hits so hard you feel like disappearing? In the next part, we're going to talk about how to respond to failure in the exact moment it hits, and why what you do in those moments will determine whether you grow or fall back into the same destructive cycle. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. Let's not pretend failure doesn't hurt. It does. Whether it's a missed opportunity, a broken promise, a relapse, or a moment where you betrayed your own values, failure stings. It triggers every wound you've ever carried. And in those moments, your mind doesn't just say you failed. It screams, you are a failure. That's shame. And if you don't know how to handle it, it will consume you. Kristin Neff makes a critical distinction here, one that most people never learn. Guilt says, I did something wrong. It's constructive. It focuses on behavior. Shame says, I am something wrong. It's corrosive. It attacks your identity. And the problem is, most of us confuse the two. We believe that if we don't feel awful about ourselves when we mess up, we're being irresponsible, so we shame ourselves. Again and again. But shame doesn't make you accountable. It makes you afraid. It doesn't make you better. It makes you smaller. So what do you do when you fail? You meet yourself exactly where you are, with presence, honesty, and compassion. Neff developed a protocol for these moments, and it begins with acknowledging the facts. Not sugarcoating, not denying, just facing reality. I made a mistake. This isn't the result I wanted. This step is essential. If you try to avoid the pain, it doesn't go away. It burrows deeper. You have to be willing to feel the discomfort without letting it define you. Next, validate the emotion. You're disappointed, hurt, embarrassed, frustrated. Maybe all of the above. That's not weakness. That's human. Say it to yourself clearly. Of course I'm feeling this. This mattered to me. That's why it hurts. You don't need to minimize your pain to get past it. You need to witness it. Then comes the transformative step. Reconnect to common humanity. This is where shame loses its grip. Because shame thrives in isolation. It tells you that you are uniquely flawed, that no one else messes up like you do. But that's a lie. Everyone fails. Everyone says the wrong thing, misses the mark, breaks down under pressure. So say it out loud. Everyone who has ever tried to do something meaningful has failed. I am not alone in this. That one sentence can break the spell of self-hatred. Now comes self-kindness, and this is where most people flinch. You've been trained to believe that kindness in moments of failure is dangerous, indulgent, weak. But ask yourself, what has cruelty ever built in you other than fear? Place your hand on your heart, breathe deeply, and say, this is hard, but I am still worthy of love. I am still capable of learning. I can hold myself with compassion and still grow. That's not complacency. That's courage. It takes more strength to stand by yourself in failure than it does to attack yourself and call it discipline. And finally, when the emotion has moved and the nervous system has settled, ask the essential question, what did I learn? Not from a place of shame, but from curiosity. Not, how did I screw this up? But what insight is here for me? When self-compassion is your baseline, mistakes stop being threats to your identity. They become teachers. And that's when you truly begin to evolve. These moments of failure, when your instinct is to spiral into shame, are the most important moments in your psychological life. Because how you respond to them defines the trajectory of everything else. Are you going to dig the hole deeper with judgment and self-rejection? Or are you going to plant something there, something that can grow? But what if the real problem isn't the moment of failure, but the fact that you've been dragging the weight of past failures for years, regrets you can't let go of, memories that still make your chest tighten, a version of yourself you haven't forgiven? In the next part, we'll talk about how to break free from the prison of past mistakes, and finally give yourself the permission to move forward. Because growth isn't just about what you do next, it's about what you're willing to release. Some of the deepest pain we carry isn't from what's happening now. It's from what we've already survived. Maybe you replay that one moment where you let someone down. Maybe you still hear the words you said in anger and wish you could take them back. Maybe it's the opportunity you missed, the promise you broke, the version of yourself you can't forget or forgive. And here's the truth. Self-criticism doesn't end when the mistake ends. It festers. It becomes chronic. You carry it like armor, thinking that if you never let go of the guilt, you're somehow paying off the debt. But all you're doing is keeping the wound open. You're not being responsible. You're being imprisoned. Kristin Neff reminds us that self-compassion means recognizing that you did the best you could with the awareness, tools, and resources you had at the time. That doesn't mean excusing harm. It means understanding it, so you can grow from it, instead of being defined by it. So let's be clear. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is not pretending it didn't matter. Forgiveness is saying, this mattered deeply. I wish I had done it differently, but I refuse to let this pain define who I am becoming. That is a powerful act of defiance and healing. Neff offers a practice she calls the self-forgiveness letter. It's not a gimmick, it's a ritual. You sit down and you write to yourself, not from your critic, but from your highest self. The part of you that understands, that sees your full story, not just the worst chapter. You write, I know you were doing your best. I see the pain behind your choices. I know you've carried this long enough. I forgive you. I release this now. And when you're done, you read it out loud. Maybe you cry, maybe you don't. But something breaks open, because for the first time, you're not punishing yourself. You're witnessing yourself. Forgiveness allows you to stop dragging the weight of who you were into the life you're trying to build. Without it, self-compassion is incomplete. You can't fully support your growth while resenting the ground it's growing from. You don't have to love everything you've done, but you do have to stop treating your past self like a villain. That version of you was just trying to survive. They weren't weak. They were in pain, and they got you here, to this moment, where you finally have the chance to do it differently. So here's your choice. You can keep replaying the past like a punishment, or you can use it as fuel. You can keep proving to yourself that you're unworthy, or you can decide, right now, that your worth was never in question. And if any part of you is still clinging to the voice that says, I don't deserve to let this go, ask yourself this. Who benefits from you staying stuck in shame? Who suffers when you don't forgive yourself? The answer is always the same. You do. Let go. You're allowed to. And if this message resonated with you, if there's a part of you that's ready to stop fighting and start healing, write it in the comments. Just one sentence. I'm ready to let go. Say it as a declaration to yourself. Let it be the first step. And don't stop here. The next video is already waiting. And trust me, it's important. Keep watching. Let us go on this journey together. I'll see you there.